Baylor nailed it with their new alternate football uniforms, but is there too much of a bad stigma attached to it? Let's discuss on Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor. I am your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and the Rogue Media Network. Today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Thank you for making it your first listen today and every day. Very excited to bring you our final day for a few months of 5 days a week podcasts. By the way, next week we start 3 days a week, so we're going to do some cool, fun content with that. I'll still be talking to you, but it's going to be a little bit more thought out, maybe some more interviews in there as well, with it being the off season. But today we're going to talk about the new uniforms again, and the ones that Baylor dropped yesterday. And this one's a little bit more positive, but can it always be more positive? Does something need to bring it down every time? Apparently so, but we're going to talk about it. And we're still potentially looking in the transfer portal for men's basketball. We have a whole bunch of names that basically re-entered the portal because they withdrew their name from the NBA draft. One within this conference is very intriguing. And I caught up with the Locked On College Football guys just about what needs to be a successful season for Baylor football this year. So we're going to include that at the end of today's episode as well. Starting with the new uniforms. I thought the set of three, kind of the, real set, traditional set, of new Baylor uniforms that were dropped on Tuesday were rather underwhelming. They've grown on me a little bit. I kind of get it. Honestly, this was a big Nike thing for me. I don't think Baylor went in there was just like, let's just add stripes to it. As much as we can be cynical about Baylor sometimes, I don't think that's what happened. I think Nike wanted to be too basic with this. They've done this with a couple other teams as well. But there was, at the end of that original hype video, a fourth silhouette, clearly a fourth one. So it's like, oh boy, we're going to get another uniform. And they announced it right away that, hey, Thursday, tune in, 10 a.m., same time, we're going to show you the new uniform. And I got a peek at it on Wednesday night. It did not disappoint then. It did not disappoint after the hype video on Thursday. The new anthracite uniforms, basically black. I mean, dark enough gray, dark enough charcoal to be black uniforms, which we have been begging for years. Dave Aranda might have tipped that hand like months and months ago in the middle of last season when they asked him what his favorite uniform was. And he says, I really like the black ones. And we were like, we don't have those, Dave. So I don't know if he knew that was coming or not, but these are fantastic. It is anthracite. They have gold numbers, gold letters, and they actually have in big letters across the front, BAYLOR, finally having Baylor on the front, which, as you could tell from, this and the episode the other day, I am big into that. I love seeing that. I think as much as I want us to be recognizable by just the colors, we're not. So I like having Baylor across the chest. It comes with an anthracite helmet as well. It was announced that they would continue to wear Sailor Bear on the helmet too for homecoming. Don't know what games this uniform is going to be busted out yet. Oh, on the shoulder pads are the old bear claw. It's not as big as the old one. You can actually, if you're watching on YouTube, see this right behind me, even though it's a black uniform and the paw is kind of anthracite, you can see that it's a bear paw. And I thought that was a really cool touch to those old uniforms that we all love now more than ever. And that was on purpose. In the press release from Baylor Football, they said that is to pay tribute to the 2013, 2014 Big 12 championship teams, some of the best teams in Baylor football history. And with that came some pushback on social media. Some by Baylor fans, a lot by non-Baylor fans. And this is the minority of people. Like most people, I think, liked this look. But there are some people questioning whether we should be celebrating that past. Of course, it's now a dark mark on Baylor's history. It's an era that is tied to scandal and a head coach that got fired, an athletic director that got fired, a president that got booted out for some just terrible mismanagement by the university. So that brings up the question again. Should we even be celebrating this era? Should we be paying tribute to those teams? I am here to tell you unequivocally and without question, yes, we should. Yes. They're not rolling out any Tevin Elliott or Sam Uguachu jerseys. They're not. These just happen to kind of look like the jerseys that the team wore 10 years ago in their most successful period in the history of the school. And yes, there were some bad eggs that created a bad culture around this program. But again, you're not putting Tevin Elliott's name on the back. You're not doing that. So yeah, of course we should, because like literally 99.5% of these guys who played in those years did nothing wrong. So yes, it's okay to celebrate that we had a good football team back then, because there was a lot of positivity that came with that. Does it outweigh the terrible things that happened to some people on our campus? No, it does not. It doesn't. But it's over. The cases are over. Everyone got fired. We've moved on. It is okay to bring back a black uniform, even though they wore them when Art Briles was the coach. And I think it's pretty silly to say, no, you should completely erase that from your repertoire. You can't even wear those colors anymore. I think that's silly. You know, the Patriots did not abandon their jerseys after Aaron Hernandez was convicted of murder. The Bills went back to the uniforms that O.J. Simpson wore. SMU kept their uniforms after their scandal. Colorado wore throwback uniforms to their late 80s, early 90s teams, where they used to bring the freaking media guide to instead of a police lineup at the Boulder police station. It's okay. They're just uniforms. And by the way, they look badass. They look awesome. We've been wanting this for years. And now I'm going to be the annoying guy who is saying we need to wear the black uniforms, anthracite, every game. I don't care if it's 100 degrees, 2:30 afternoon kickoff. Let's wear them. They look cool. Yes, it is okay. And I've said it before. I'm glad that the university is actually honoring these teams before the TCU game, which I'm willing to bet will be a game where they are wearing those black uniforms, anthracite uniforms. But I just found that so bizarre. Like it's uniforms. We're not building Art Briles a statue. We're not building Ian McCaw a statue. We're just wearing uniforms that look like the ones they wore 10 years ago. Yes, it is okay to honor those teams. In fact, we could do it a little more, honestly. So yeah, bring on the anthracite, man. I'm all the way there. And I would love to be all the way at the NBA Finals. And if I'm going to do that, or if I'm looking to get to any sports game that I want to go to, or comedy show, concert, theater, anything like that, I'm going to Gametime for a couple of reasons. It's really the best place to buy tickets. You go in there, you see the all-in pricing, not the tons of hidden fees that triple the price like you'll see at other websites. Not the case at Gametime. You see it, you see the view from your seat, and you see the price that you're going to pay all before hitting the purchase button. It's got the best customer service and repayment in the entire industry. They've got zone deals, flash deals going on all week. If you find a seat in or a ticket in your row, your section on another website that is a better deal than Gametime, they're going to credit you 110% of the difference. It is the best customer service you can get when buying tickets, because you know it can be a hassle these days, but not with our friends over at Gametime. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDON, for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. So now we sit in basically June. It's the last day of May as this is premiering. And Baylor is still looking in the transfer portal for men's basketball. We think. And we've talked all in this offseason about how this has become a 52-week, 12-month, a year, 365, in this case, 66 days, a year job because of what the transfer portal has done to college sports, and specifically in this case, college basketball. And so what we've gotten is a new breath of life into the transfer portal at the end of May, because just yesterday was, or midnight on the 29th, was the final day, the final time that you could declare for the NBA draft. So a bunch of guys withdrew their names, and some big names withdrew their names from the NBA draft. And one that I'm looking at is Arthur Kaluma from Kansas State. This was one that, from what I could tell and what I could read leading up to the point, it was not a done deal one way or the other, whether he was going to come back or whether he was going to keep in the NBA draft. And he has decided he's going to stay in college, and he's in the portal. And there's not a ton of leads on him. He hasn't like scheduled visits or anything like that we've seen, that I've seen in my research. So Arthur Kaluma is available. Should Baylor take a run at him? Yes. I'm not even going to pause there. Yes. Now I can hear you from the back. Cam, you say they need a center. He's not a center. He's a forward. That's correct. That is correct. And in an ideal world, you'll get the center. Ugana Onyenso is the one that I love. He's got some teams on his trail. Baylor's not one of them. But Arthur Kaluma is standing at 6'7", wingspan over 7 feet tall. Norchad Omier, I think, who is about 6'7", 6'8". I think you're going to see him play some small ball 5 as well. I think Baylor could do a lot of small ball this year, because Omier, you can talk about the height all day long. He rebounds the crap out of the ball. He averaged over 10 rebounds a game last year. So does Arthur Kaluma. He can rebound it, man. Averaged over 7 a year last year and was top 15 in scoring in the Big 12 last year for Jerome Tang's Kansas State Wildcats. Had 14 and 7 average on the year. 14.7 rebounds on 43% shooting. He's had some good games against Baylor too. He had 12 and 10 against them last year, that wild overtime victory for Kansas State up in Manhattan. You remember there was someone who had a 4-point play to put them in the lead for good with under 30 seconds left in overtime. That was our guy, Arthur Kaluma. He played at Creighton before that, knocked Baylor out of the tournament the year before, 11 and 7 in that game. So he can play against Baylor. Maybe it's worth it for the Bears to get him on the roster just so they're not going against him this year. I don't know, maybe. But I thought he had I was really impressed in the games that I watched from him with Kansas State this year. To be averaging 14 and 7 in the Big 12 in your first year in the Big 12, that's not bad at all, especially for a team in Kansas State that had its challenges offensively. I know they had some good scorers. Tyler Perry comes to mind, but they really struggled offensively at points this year, and he was steady Eddie. Plenty of double doubles in this league, including one against Baylor. He is a terrific rebounder. He was 3rd in defensive rebounds in the conference, 6th in total rebounds in the conference. He was 4th in the entire Big 12 in free throws attempted, which is something I like. It means, he even when things aren't going for him, he can get to the line. And he did shoot 75%, which you're like, well, Cam, that's not great. To which I would say your 2 centers last year, Josh O shot 66%, Yves Missi shot 63%. So you'll take that. You'll take that. You were 1 free throw from a big man away from beating the number 2 team in the country last year in Houston, lest we forget. So having someone who can hit a little bit more than that, and someone whose game is still growing. You look at the numbers from Creighton to Kansas State, he is still getting better. That's a big win. And he's a disruptor at the rim. Again, even at 6'7", he's a long 6'7". And he even started to develop a bit of a 3-point stroke. I'm not sitting here telling you he's a 3-point shooter. I'm not saying that. Please don't get that twisted. But in his 3 years in college basketball, he goes from 27% to 31% to 35% last year. 35% is enough that you got to respect it. I don't want him living out there, but it's enough that you have to respect it. And all his numbers go up. And I know that might be like, well, of course he's getting older, but when you make a jump from a Creighton, albeit a very good program in the Big East, to the Big 12, we take that seriously. To jump almost 3 points a game last year, moving to a tougher conference. That is terrific. That is terrific for this young man, and averaging almost 2 offensive rebounds a game. He added almost a rebound and a half a game, going from the Big East to the Big 10, or excuse me, to the Big 12. And by the way, added about 6 minutes a game. He played 35 minutes a game last year for Jerome Tang. So that shows that there is confidence. They need him out there in order to, I mean, they were scratching and clawing for a tournament spot and ended up going in the NIT, but Kaluma was absolutely one of the bright spots for the Bears, or excuse me, the Wildcats, hopefully for the Bears. And that would be an intriguing thing. We have not seen anyone transfer through the Scott Drew coaching tree. Still, I thought we might see Miro Little out at FAU because he was a John Jacobs guy. Nope, didn't see it. So no one from, Tech, and before that, North Texas with McCaslin, no one from Baylor and Kansas State, no one with North Florida, no one with Oral Roberts and now Wichita State. It hasn't happened yet. Could this be the first one? Kaluma only played 1 year for Jerome Tang. Maybe he's a devout Jerome Tang loyalist and Scott Drew won't even pick up the phone, but there is still room on this front court. Even for, I think there's a ton of talent there, but it's thin. I love Norchad Omier. You've heard me say that plenty. I really like Josh O's potential still. I thought he could have taken another step last year, but playing Yves Missi more than I think we all thought might have done something to that. But I think Josh O can be more than a serviceable starting center for this team. I really do. I still thought he made some young guy mistakes last year, but he's got some sneaky versatility defensively for a guy of his size. Like, he still has that athleticism that he can do a lot of good things for you, especially on that defensive end, which is of course something that Baylor needs to bulk up. And I think you'll get that with Omier as well. I think you'll get it in the backcourt with someone like Jeremy Roach, and the potential for VJ Edgecombe to be a top end defender is there even in year one. So yeah, you still need to look big. And again, I'll bring up the name again. Ugonna Onyenso from Kentucky is kind of an ideal what you're looking for. Center, 7'5" wingspan, had a SEC game, I think it was against Arkansas, where he blocked 10 shots, or maybe it was Ole Miss, Chris Beard's Ole Miss. Blocked 10 shots in a game, averaged like 2.5 blocks a game at under 20 minutes a game. Like, that's fantastic. That is one of the top rim potentially one of the top rim protectors in the entire country kind of stuff. But Kaluma is going to give you a lot of that as well. Even at 6'7", again, long, can shoot it a little bit. We've seen it against Baylor, can potentially be a double-double machine, even in the stacked Big 12. So absolutely, I think Baylor should give him a look. Got to keep track of who is going after him, but it seems like certainly Baylor could be a player, because we just haven't heard a lot about who is in for Arthur Kaluma. But I think he could be a terrific addition to an already really talented Baylor team.
Where does Baylor fit into the madness that is the Big 12? Cam Stewart, Locked On Baylor, joining me to discuss. Let's just answer that question, Cameron. Where do you see Baylor fitting into what is the deepest conference in America, if you're talking about the number of teams that can win the conference championship?
Well, I would say the hope is that Baylor would fit in around the middle of the pack. I think that would be a good season for Baylor, considering where they were last year, which was the basement of the Big 12, and you add some good programs on top of what you had last year. So I don't see a world where they're in the top 3 of the conference. I'd be very pleasantly surprised, top quarter even. But I would see them as a middle of the pack team if the additions they've made go well, and I'm not just talking about the players, but the coaching staff as well. So I see them as a middle of the road Big 12 team, which is suddenly, a much crazier league than it was even last year.
I feel like Baylor as a football program has had as many ebbs and flows and peaks and valleys as anyone, maybe in the country. They have been at the bottom, they have been at the top, and it's just kind of this constant up down. I am now going to dub Baylor the elevator football program. You can take them to the top floor, or you can take them all the way down to the freaking basement. Cam, you can go anywhere you can go anywhere that you would like, anywhere you feel is capable. Can Dave Aranda get them back up to the top?
I think so. But that's a belief thing. This is, look, we're the largest Baptist university in the world. We're going full faith right now because we kind of have seen it. Granted, it was a Matt Rule roster that he had in 2021, Dave's second season in Waco, when they, finished in the top 5. They won the Sugar Bowl. They won the Big 12, all of that. But it's such a far cry from that right now. So can he take them? I think so. But at this point, it's put up or shut up time. And they've got to make some serious improvements starting this year for him to just keep his job. And I think Dave is a great football mind. I think there is one of the great defensive minds in all of college football still in there. We're just waiting to see if he's going to do that as the head coach. And my biggest fear, Spencer, I'm a big Patriots fan as well. I'm from Boston. So my biggest fear is that we are the Bill Belichick Browns with Dave Aranda, that it's not going to quite work out. He's going to go somewhere else. He's going to be a DC, do great. And then he's going to be awesome somewhere else as a head coach. That's my biggest fear, because I think he is capable of that. So that's
also a very, very valid fear, because once upon a time, the Jets fired Bill Belichick, and then he started messing with them on national television and smirking about it on the sidelines. So you best hope you don't have that situation locked in there if they do move on from Dave Aranda. But I want to stay on this for just a moment before we talk about the moves he's made to try and keep his job over there in Waco. Is this a situation in which a coaching change could transpire in the middle of the season if things don't go according to plan?
I think it is. Yeah, I think you are looking at a bit of a Scott Frost, Nebraska situation where it could go haywire and he could be gone quick. And like, we know that it's been Mack Rhodes, the athletic director. He's kind of staked his job on keeping Dave Aranda here. And Mack has made some great progress in this athletic department. I really like him as an athletic director, but as we know, it's football or bust, especially at a school like Baylor in the Big 12 and in Texas. You've got to be able to compete in football, and they have not been able to do that the last 2 seasons. So it could well be a case where that could happen. In fact, we talked about this. I did it with Locked On Big 12 a few days ago. You've got Jake Spavital on the staff, a former head coach, not a wildly successful one, but a former head coach but
a successful offensive coordinator at his last stop. He did very well last year at Cal.
Yeah. And you also added Gary Patterson to your staff this year. So there are guys on this staff who can right a ship in the middle of a season. And I think it's not lost on anybody, including Dave Aranda, that this could be borrowed time month by month. And, you get through the month and you exhale once we start getting into the season.
Let's talk about the moves that Aranda and his staff have made. Give me your top 2 transfers that are going to come in, make an impact, and help Baylor be better than fans might think they could be.
I'll give you one offensive, one defensive, because this is a well-rounded show, and I'm gonna stick to that.
I like that.
I've got to go offense to Quan Finn, who I think is going to be the starting quarterback. Baylor's not named the starting quarterback yet, but this is a former MAC Player of the Year at Toledo who had them in the championship game twice, in their conference championship game, and a terrific, exciting player. We've heard links to Trevon Boykin in terms of his style and the plays that he can make, which if you get half of a 2014 Trevon Boykin, you're in a really good spot.
You got a football player. You got a football player right there.
Man. And so I think, you can't, I like some of the receivers they've brought in, but you got to start at quarterback there. And on the defensive side, I really like this Jaquez Evans. He's coming in from Western Kentucky, and he is coming off an injury. He missed the last half of last season, but before that, he was the Defensive Player of the Year in 22, and first team All whatever conference that is, Conference USA.
Conference USA.
In 2022.
Conference USA. It's okay.
Love
It can
me
be
some
very
Hill
hard to
Toppers.
keep track of what
It's a
team
lot,
is in
man.
what conference nowadays. It is exceedingly difficult. That is Conference USA. The Hilltoppers, they have that great looking mascot. He's
Yes.
like a
Shout out Big Red, man.
yeah, Big Red.
He's
Big
awesome.
Red. There we are. Yes,
He's
he
awesome.
is.
And so Jaquez Evans comes in. He was first team all defense, then preseason conference defensive player of the year last year before he got hurt. He's one of these edge rushers who lives in the backfield, which are the good kind of edge rushers. And Baylor really needs help at that position, both interior and on the edge on the defensive line. They just have not had a pass rush the last 2 seasons after having a truly elite one in 2021. So I think he can make a similar difference on the defensive side than a quarterback can on the offensive side with how much Baylor needs that.
When you look at Baylor's schedule, their preseason win total, according to our friends at FanDuel, set at 5.5. What is a successful season for the Bears?
Hitting the over and just barely. I mean, I think they got to make a bowl game. I think that kind of goes without saying. I think most programs are looking at that as a baseline right now, more so than ever before. I think they've got to be 6-6 and in a bowl game. I can't see this team being 9-3, 10-2. I think that would be a great overachievement. But I think they've got to have a winning record, and they've got to start there. Winning record and keeping your recruiting class, which I know is not always controllable, but got to start with that winning record. So 6-6, what I'm putting it at.
And you're going to need some good quarterback play because the Big 12, as I mentioned before, best quarterback conference in America. Last year was the Pac-12, and this year it is absolutely the Big 12. You got Shedeur Sanders, you got Noah Fafita, you got Cam Rising at Utah, you've got Jalen Daniels at Kansas, you got Rocco Becht at Iowa State. I mean, you just keep going down the list.
At Baylor.
DeQuan Finn at Baylor. We shall see. Cam Stewart locked on Baylor. Appreciate the time, Cam. And before I go, just a quick 60-second thought because I'm talking about this next. Iowa State, Big 12 contender or pretender? What do you say?
I have them as a contender. Not a huge Cyclone expert, but I loved what I saw out of them, and I really liked Rocco Becht last year. So I've got them as a sneaky contender the way we thought of Tech last year.
I'll talk about them coming up next.
Thank you all for tuning in today. Drop down in the comments below what you think Baylor football needs to be at this year, record-wise, what you think of potentially Arthur Kaluma coming from Jerome Tang to Scott Drew. Think that could be really interesting. And what you think about these new uniforms, specifically the meaning behind them. Should we be celebrating this team or should we leave it all in the past? Drop that down in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe. We're here on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. We will be going to 3 days a week starting next week, but that's going to allow us to do some fun stuff. So be sure to like and subscribe again. Thank you for making it your first listen today and every day. And we'll be back Monday with more Locked On Baylor.